What if I told you that some of the world's most trusted corporations have been hiding deadly secrets for decades? Secrets so dark that they've cost millions of lives, destroyed entire communities, and changed the course of human history forever. Today, we're diving into 8 shocking corporate cover-ups that will make your blood boil and question everything you thought you knew about the companies that shape our world. What if an entire industry built its empire on a foundation of lies so profound that it would claim more lives than both world wars combined? In the sterile laboratories and mahogany boardrooms of America's tobacco giants, a dark secret festered for decades. As early as the 1950s, internal company documents reveal that executives at Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds, and other major manufacturers possessed damning evidence. Their products were killing their customers. The science was clear, the data undeniable. Cigarettes caused cancer. Yet for the next 50 years, these same companies would orchestrate one of the most elaborate deceptions in corporate history. The machinery of deceit was vast and sophisticated. Billions of dollars flowed into creating fraudulent research, studies designed to muddy the waters of scientific consensus. Respected scientists found their integrity compromised by industry bribes, publishing papers that contradicted their own private findings. Meanwhile, the companies deployed their marketing departments like military strategists, specifically targeting the most vulnerable populations, children who couldn't comprehend the risks and minority communities who had limited access to healthcare information. The performance reached its crescendo on a spring day in 1994 when 7 tobacco executives raised their right hands before Congress. One by one, they swore under oath that nicotine was not addictive, their faces masks of corporate composure as they committed perjury before the nation. Behind them sat decades of their own research proving the exact opposite. Studies showing nicotine's grip on the human brain, documents calculating addiction rates, memos discussing how to manipulate nicotine levels for maximum dependency. The human cost of this conspiracy defies comprehension. Conservative estimates suggest that over 100 million people died preventable deaths worldwide, victims not just of tobacco, but of the deliberate suppression of life-saving information. Public health measures that could have been implemented in the 1950s were delayed by decades, allowing entire generations to fall into addiction's snare while the companies counted their profits. Today, the tobacco industry's internal documents lie exposed in court archives and research databases, a paper trail of calculated malice preserved for history. But as we examine this conspiracy of silence, one cannot help but wonder. In boardrooms across the world, in industries we trust with our health, our environment, our future, what other secrets are being carefully guarded behind locked doors? In the shadowy corridors of corporate power, some secrets are too dark to ever fully surface. What happens when a company's pursuit of profit becomes more important than human life itself? Deep within the jungles of Vietnam between 1962 and 1971, American aircraft released over 19 million gallons of a chemical defoliant known as Agent Orange. What soldiers and civilians didn't know was that this rainbow-colored herbicide contained something far more sinister than anyone had been told. Hidden within its formula was dioxin, one of the most toxic substances known to humanity. Behind closed doors at Monsanto, the chemical giant producing Agent Orange, executives were well aware of what they had unleashed. Internal company memos discovered decades later revealed a chilling truth. Monsanto's leadership had known about dioxin's devastating health effects since the 1960s. They understood it could cause birth defects, cancer, and a host of other life-threatening conditions, yet they chose silence over disclosure, profit over human welfare. Even as American soldiers returned home with mysterious illnesses and Vietnamese families began giving birth to severely deformed children, Monsanto continued its production. The company's own workers were falling ill from dioxin exposure within their facilities, but these incidents were systematically covered up, buried beneath layers of corporate bureaucracy and medical denials. The evidence was mounting, but the machinery of deception kept grinding forward. When the truth finally began to surface, Monsanto deployed an army of lawyers and lobbyists to fight compensation claims. For decades, they contested the link between Agent Orange and the suffering it caused, even as millions of people across 2 continents lived with its devastating legacy. Veterans developed rare cancers, children were born without limbs, and entire ecosystems remained poisoned. Today, the effects of Agent Orange continue to ripple through generations, a toxic inheritance passed from parent to child in both America and Vietnam. One must wonder, in the endless pursuit of corporate profit, how many other deadly secrets still lie buried in boardroom files, waiting to be discovered. What if the very company that helped fuel our modern world knew decades ago that it was slowly destroying it? Deep within the corporate headquarters of Exxon, a different kind of oil was flowing in the 1970s. Not crude oil, but information so precise, so damning, that it would remain buried for nearly 40 years. The company's own scientists were quietly conducting research that would paint a chilling picture of Earth's future. Their internal reports didn't just acknowledge climate change, they predicted it with startling accuracy, forecasting rising sea levels and global temperature shifts that matched almost perfectly with what we observe today. Yet while these scientists documented the truth, behind closed doors, Exxon's public face told a very different story. The company channeled over $30 million into a carefully orchestrated campaign of doubt, funding organizations that would question the very science their own researchers had confirmed. They bankrolled studies designed to cast shadows on climate research, creating a fog of uncertainty where clarity had once existed. It was a masterclass in corporate deception, executed with the precision of a military operation. Perhaps most unsettling was the company's private acknowledgement of the crisis they publicly denied. Even as Exxon's spokesman appeared on television questioning climate science, their engineers were quietly retrofitting oil rigs to withstand the rising seas they claimed weren't coming. The company was literally preparing for a future they told the world would never arrive, a contradiction so stark it defies comprehension. But the most chilling revelation lay in the company's long-term strategy. Internal documents revealed that executives viewed the melting Arctic ice not as a catastrophe, but as an opportunity. As the polar ice caps retreated, exactly as their scientists had predicted, new drilling sites would emerge from the thawing landscape. They planned to extract more of the very substance causing the melt, in a cycle of destruction so perfect it seemed almost intentional. This campaign of deliberate misinformation didn't just mislead the public, it stole something far more precious: time. Decades of crucial climate action were lost while the world debated a science that Exxon knew to be settled. The storms we face today, the rising seas, the unprecedented heat, all made worse by years of inaction built on lies. One has to wonder, in the boardrooms of other corporations, what other inconvenient truths lie waiting to be discovered. And more importantly, what are they planning to do with the disasters they see coming? In the pre-dawn darkness of December 3, 1984, a silent killer drifted through the streets of Bhopal, India, but the true horror wasn't just what happened that night, it was what those in power knew was coming. For months before that fateful December evening, Union Carbide's executives were well aware their Bhopal pesticide plant was a catastrophe waiting to happen. Internal reports documented gas leaks, seeping through corroded pipes, safety systems failing with alarming regularity, and equipment that had been deliberately downgraded to cut costs. The warnings came from engineers, from safety inspectors, from anyone brave enough to speak up. Yet the corporate machinery ground on, prioritizing profit margins over human lives. When 42 tons of toxic methyl isocyanate gas finally escaped into the night air, it moved like a phantom through the sleeping city. Thousands died in their beds, in the streets, gasping for air that had turned poisonous. But even as bodies were still being counted, Union Carbide's response revealed a calculated cruelty that defied comprehension. The company immediately pointed fingers at local workers, spinning elaborate theories of sabotage without a shred of evidence, anything to deflect responsibility from corporate headquarters. As investigations began and lawsuits mounted, Union Carbide executed what can only be described as a corporate vanishing act. Executives fled India like shadows retreating from dawn, abandoning not just legal accountability, but leaving behind a toxic legacy that continues to this day. The contaminated land still leaches poison into groundwater systems, creating new victims decades later. Children born into a world where their very environment carries the sins of corporate negligence. Perhaps most chilling of all were the internal documents that eventually surfaced, revealing Union Carbide's true priorities with stark clarity. The company had detailed emergency evacuation plans, not for the hundreds of thousands of people living around the plant, but exclusively for their own executives and foreign personnel. In the corporate calculus, some lives were worth saving, others were simply acceptable losses. Today, the abandoned Union Carbide plant stands like a monument to institutional indifference, its rusted structures still containing tons of toxic waste that no one claims responsibility for cleaning up. One has to wonder, in boardrooms around the world, how many other corporate time bombs are ticking away, waiting for the right combination of negligence and greed to unleash their horror upon the innocent. What is the exact dollar value of a human life? In the corporate boardrooms of Ford Motor Company during the 1970s, executives believed they had calculated the answer. The Ford Pinto seemed destined for success, a compact car designed to compete in the growing economy vehicle market. But beneath its ordinary exterior lay a deadly secret that Ford's own engineers had discovered during pre-production testing. The Pinto's gas tank, positioned behind the rear axle, would rupture and explode during rear-end collisions. The fuel system's vulnerable design turned what should have been survivable crashes into death traps, engulfing passengers in flames. Rather than redesign the flawed system, Ford's executives made a chilling decision. They commissioned a cost-benefit analysis that would become one of corporate America's most notorious calculations. Company analysts determined that fixing the design flaw would cost $11 per vehicle. Against this expense, they weighed the projected cost of legal settlements for wrongful death and injury lawsuits. The numbers Ford's accountants produced were as precise as they were cold. They estimated the Pinto's defective fuel system would cause 180 deaths and 180 severe burn injuries. Yet even with these grim projections, the mathematics favored inaction. Paying settlements to grieving families would cost less than implementing the safety fix across their production line. Internal company memos revealed the disturbing truth. Ford executives knew that every Pinto rolling off the assembly line carried a calculated risk of immolating its occupants. For 8 years, this deadly arithmetic remained hidden while hundreds of preventable deaths and injuries occurred in fiery crashes across American highways. Families lost loved ones not to unavoidable accidents, but to a corporate decision that human lives were worth less than $11 per car. The Pinto case raises a haunting question that echoes through corporate boardrooms even today. When companies reduce human lives to mere numbers on a spreadsheet, what other deadly calculations are being made in the name of profit? What if the very people trusted to heal were being systematically deceived by those who knew their medicine was poison? In the sterile boardrooms of Purdue Pharma, executives gathered around polished tables, their faces illuminated by the glow of profit projections. They possessed a terrible knowledge. Their flagship product, OxyContin, was highly addictive, a chemical trap disguised as salvation. Yet as they reviewed marketing materials, they watched their teams craft a different narrative entirely, that OxyContin had low addiction potential, a lie that would echo through doctors' offices across America like a whispered curse. The deception ran deeper than false advertising. Sales representatives, armed with carefully scripted talking points, fanned out across the country with a singular mission. They were coached to target doctors who prescribed high doses of opioids, turning healers into unwitting dealers. When questions about addiction arose, these representatives had their answers ready. Downplay the risks, emphasize the benefits, and always keep the pills flowing. Behind closed doors, the company's true nature revealed itself in internal emails that read like evidence from a crime scene. When patients inevitably fell into the grip of addiction, Purdue executives didn't express concern or remorse. Instead, they labeled these suffering souls as drug seekers and addicts, shifting blame onto the very victims of their calculated deception. The company had become a machine that manufactured both pills and excuses in equal measure. While communities crumbled and families shattered, the Sackler family, Purdue's controlling dynasty, executed a different kind of extraction. Billions of dollars flowed from the company into their personal accounts, a financial hemorrhaging that occurred even as they watched their product destroy lives. They had found a way to profit from misery while maintaining the veneer of respectability, their name adorning museum wings even as it should have been etched on tombstones. The mathematics of their lies are written in death certificates. Over 500,000 Americans have perished in an epidemic that Purdue's deception helped ignite. The company's false promises didn't just mislead doctors and patients, they fundamentally altered the trajectory of American public health, turning prescription pads into instruments of mass destruction. Today, the crisis continues to claim lives, each overdose a testament to the power of corporate lies to reshape reality itself. In the end, one must wonder if a handful of executives could orchestrate such devastation from their boardrooms, what other quiet conspiracies might be unfolding in the shadows of corporate America, waiting for their own terrible harvest. What if the very surface that promised to make your life easier was slowly poisoning everyone you loved? In the 1960s, deep within the sterile laboratories of DuPont, scientists made a discovery that would haunt the company for decades. The CA chemical, essential to creating their revolutionary non-stick Teflon coating, carried a dark secret. Test after test revealed the same chilling truth. This substance caused cancer, birth defects, and irreversible organ damage. Yet as families across America embrace the convenience of non-stick cookware, DuPont's executives made a calculated decision to bury these findings in locked filing cabinets. For 50 years, the chemical giant operated under a veil of silence that grew thicker with each passing decade. Toxic waste flowed freely into drinking water supplies, contaminating entire communities while DuPont's own health studies gathered dust, hidden from regulators who might have sounded the alarm. The company's workers, those closest to the production line, began developing rare and aggressive cancers. When brave employees attempted to speak out, they found themselves facing threats and intimidation that silenced their voices. Perhaps most disturbing of all were the internal documents that would eventually surface, revealing the true scope of what DuPont knew. Company executives had discovered that C8 coursed through the bloodstream of 99% of all Americans. Every man, woman, and child had unknowingly become part of an uncontrolled experiment. Yet production continued, profits soared into the billions, and the contamination spread like an invisible plague through water systems, serving millions. The machinery of deception operated with corporate precision. While DuPont publicly maintained that their products were safe, private meetings told a different story. Scientists were silenced, studies were suppressed, and an entire generation grew up drinking water laced with a poison that would remain in their bodies for decades. The company had transformed a kitchen convenience into a public health catastrophe, all while maintaining the facade of responsible corporate citizenship. When the truth finally emerged, it painted a portrait of institutional callousness that defied comprehension. For half a century, DuPont had chosen profits over people, silence over science, and deception over disclosure. The C8 contamination had become so widespread that it represented one of the most pervasive chemical exposures in human history, affecting virtually every person on the planet. Today, as investigators continue to uncover the full extent of the damage, one question lingers in the shadows. In a world where corporate secrets can poison entire populations, what other invisible threats flow through our water, drift through our air, and hide behind the promise of progress? What if the very machine designed to protect you became the instrument of your demise? What if those sworn to safeguard lives chose profits over people, watching silently as bodies piled up? In the sterile corridors of General Motors engineering facilities in 2001, a discovery was made that would haunt the company for over a decade. Engineers had identified a fatal flaw lurking within their vehicle's ignition switches, a defect so dangerous it could steal the power from a car mid-drive, leaving drivers helpless on busy highways. Yet, as the engineers presented their findings, the response wasn't urgency or concern, it was cold calculation. The cost of a recall, they determined, outweighed the cost of human lives. The company had made a deliberate choice to install cheaper, defective parts, knowing full well they would cause engines to shut off without warning during driving. But the true horror lay not just in the mechanical failure, but in what it triggered. When these faulty switches failed, they didn't just kill the engine. They disabled the airbags, transforming what might have been survivable crashes into death traps. Families driving to work, to school, to visit loved ones found themselves in vehicles that had become their coffins. Within the corporate walls of GM, a different kind of conspiracy was taking shape. Employees received explicit instructions, certain words were forbidden in internal communications. Defect was not to be used. Safety was banned from their vocabulary. It was as if by controlling the language, they could control the reality of what was happening on America's roads. Meanwhile, the death toll climbed silently, at least 124 souls lost to preventable accidents. Perhaps most chilling of all were the internal emails that would later surface, revealing the callous mindset of executives who joked about cheap customers while families mourned loved ones killed by the company's knowing negligence. For over a decade, GM buried the truth, covering up deaths that could have been prevented with a simple recall. The corporation had become something far more sinister than a car manufacturer. It had become a silent executioner. Today, we drive our cars with the assumption that the companies who built them value our lives above their profit margins. But as the ignition switches of countless vehicles continue to turn, one must wonder what other deadly secrets are hidden behind corporate boardroom doors, waiting for their moment to claim the next unsuspecting victim. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you found this video interesting, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos.